Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's Journey, Perigord, chapters 11 to 13, by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 11. As Jason entered the school grounds, he discovered that his infamy had reached legendary proportions. He half expected another day of whispering and pointing. What he received was totally unexpected. As he walked by, people said hello. Some waved, some smiled. One even patted him on the shoulder. Jason wandered on, a little bewildered by the attention. Reaching the stairs, he felt a tap on the shoulder and turned to find Selene standing there dressed in black jeans, Union Jack t-shirt, combat boots, and trench coat. Her makeup was the same as before, except her eyes bore a touch of blue eyeliner. "Morning, Bruiser," she said, holding her fists up mockingly with a smile. "Hey, you were gone pretty quick yesterday," Jason replied, forgetting everything else around him. There was uncertainty in her eyes for a brief second, replaced with an even bigger smile. "What can I say? When I can get out of here, I'm gone," she replied nonchalantly, making a forward sweeping gesture with her hands. Selene leaned casually against the stair rail. "How did things go at home last night?" she asked. Jason sighed. "What I expected, but it was better this morning," he said thoughtfully. Selene looked at Jason, suddenly serious. "Did you bring that book in today?" "Yeah, why?" Jason asked. "I spoke to my grandmother about it, and she's very keen to have a look." "That sounds great, but what?" "But I have detention this afternoon, and I have to cook dinner tonight for Mum and me," Jason said. Selene smiled slyly. "If I can clear your schedule, are we on?" Selene asked. Jason looked skeptical but shrugged. "Sure, you bet, but I don't like your chances." Selene's grin took on a devilish quality. "The impossible is my specialty," Selene stated, and without another word, took off. Jason's day went by without a hitch. The students were friendly and the teachers polite, but they all watched him warily. Lunchtime came and Jason was prepared, deciding not to go to the cafeteria, both for the food and the unwanted attention, instead opting for a spot under a tree overlooking the sports oval. Halfway through his tuna salad sandwich, Selene popped down next to him. "So this is where you've been hiding. I've been looking for you everywhere," she said a little breathlessly. Jason took another bite of his sandwich. "Yeah, I thought I might prefer the fresh air and seclusion out here," he replied through a mouthful of tuna. Just then a trio of younger girls walked by. "Hi, Jason," one of the girls called out. "Hello," Jason replied by reflex. The girl who spoke blushed, and the other two giggled. All three quickly walked by. Jason appeared to blush a little as well. Selene was clearly enjoying his discomfort. "So that's the reason you're out here alone, to receive hero worship from young girls who clearly don't know any better," she commented sarcastically. Jason shook his head, his blush deepening. No, of course not," he said in a rush. "Relax, Bruiser, I'm just fucking with you." "Sheesh, you're such a Boy Scout," Selene said. Jason took another bite of his sandwich, his cheeks still flushed red. Selene clapped her hands together and rubbed them. "Anyway, the reason I hunted you down was to inform you that it's done," she said, flicking her hands up in the same manner a magician would at the end of performing a trick. Jason raised an eyebrow. "What's done?" "You're not required to attend detention this afternoon," she stated, a satisfied expression appearing on her face. Jason sat up. "Why? What did you do?" "Well, for starters, a thank you would be nice," Selene said. Jason placed his sandwich down. "Thank you. Hey, it's not like I'm not grateful. But how the hell did you pull that off?" Selene exhaled, laying on her back, staring up at the sky, her hands behind her head. "If one didn't know any better, one would think you assumed nefarious intent on my part," Selene said with a sigh. "My second surprise is both you and your mother are coming over to my grandmother's place for dinner tonight," Selene said. Jason looked skeptical. "Hey, I'm all for it. But I have to see if Mum's on board with that idea first, Jason replied. I said it's all sorted, Selene cut in. Jason looked perplexed. My grandmother has a lot of pull in Perigord, hence the detention, and the fact your mother couldn't refuse an offer to experience the best home cooking in town, Selene said, sitting up. I'll see you tonight. And without another word, she was gone. Jason shook his head, smiling and continuing with his lunch. He thought to himself she was the pushiest damn girl he had ever met. The rest of Jason's day went by easily enough. There was no sign of Hector or Tiberius in any of his classes, and the other kids were beginning to relax in his presence. During his last period, his English class was interrupted by one of the administration heads. The young woman quietly excused herself, handing Mr. Rosenberg a piece of paper, and quickly departed. Mr. Rosenberg called Jason to his desk, passing the paper on and instructing him to return to his seat. His usual jovial nature replaced with an obvious air of disapproval, aimed squarely at him. Jason opened the paper. It read, Mr. Page, you are exempt from attending detention as from today's date. Report to the library after school and present this letter to Ms. Brewster. She will acquit you from her roster. Regards, Leonard Florentine, Principal, Perigord High School. Jason looked around and caught Selene's gaze. She gave him a slight wave with her fingertips and mouthed the words, You're welcome. He folded the note and placed it in his pocket. He wasn't sure how Selene had done it, but he wasn't going to complain. The rest of English went quickly. On 2 occasions, Jason placed his hand in the air to respond to Mr. Rosenberg's questions, and was clearly ignored, despite being the only volunteer in class. He thought it strange, but shrugged it off. The final bell rang, and as Jason packed his bag, Selene sidled up next to him. I'll see you tonight. Before he could respond, she was gone again. After delivering his note to Ms. Brewster at the library, he returned home. He arrived to find his mother already home. Greeting him in the kitchen, she wore a bemused expression on her face. I had an interesting conversation in my surgery today with a lovely old lady, Mrs. Jaeger. Her granddaughter, Selene, is your age. She came in just before lunch bearing an apple pie the size of a tractor tire, stating it was a belated welcome gift. Helen pointed to the kitchen bench where a huge deep-dish apple pie was sitting, a sizable piece missing. Helen smiled sheepishly. It was heavenly, she added. Jason reached over to cut himself a slice. Helen slapped his hand. I was only going to have a small slice, Jason protested. You'll spoil your appetite, Helen scolded. As I was saying, Mrs. Jaeger insisted that you and I attend dinner at her house tonight, and that she wouldn't take no for an answer. She really was quite adamant, Helen added. That must be where Selene gets it from, Jason thought to himself. I don't know how she did it, but Mrs. Jaeger also got me out of my detention. Selene said she has a lot of pull in town, Jason replied thoughtfully. Well, you had better get stuck into your homework since your afternoon is now free of cooking duties. We're not due there for another 2 hours. Jason nodded dejectedly as he slowly made his way upstairs. Helen watched him go, then turned her attention to the pie sitting on the bench, a naughty smile appearing on her face. One small slice can't hurt, Helen whispered to herself. Chapter 12. Helen's van pulled onto the darkened street. Both Jason and Helen peered out through the window of the combi. They could see a small Tudor cottage quaintly built with a thatched roof and a cobblestone path that wound its way from the road to the cottage door. On either side, the path was lit with fairy lights strung up on trees and hedges, giving the yard an ethereal glow. It's purty, Jason drawled in imitation of a country redneck. Helen gave him a playful elbow in the ribs. Behave, Helen replied. Jason placed his right hand over his heart. I solemnly swear to uphold the name of Page, and not cause undue discomfort toward my mother dearest, he pledged. Helen shook her head with a smile. Let's go. Smarty pants. Jason rang the brass bell, which was intricately engraved with images of a mounted hunt. The men on horseback had drawn bows, and hounds running to their front. A large stag could be seen in the distance. Jason studied the image of the stag. Strapped to its back was a scabbard containing a sword. He thought to himself that it must be a flaw or mistake on the part of the artist. He was about to say as much to his mother when the front door opened. Jason's eyes went wide. Standing before him was Selene, wearing a beautiful blue dress, stockings, and shoes. Her hair was carefully braided. Her normally goth-themed makeup was gone, replaced with a cleanly scrubbed face. Behind Selene stood an old woman, her white hair tied up in a bun. She wore a pale gray dress and black shoes. Selene's grandmother exuded a healthy pallor and a twinkle in her eye that suggested she still had a lot of good years left in her. Selene's smile was wide and friendly, but her brow was slightly creased. "Don't just stand there, invite them in," the old woman scolded. "Forgive me, this is my grandmother Ursula," Selene said, then curtsied. The action was brief and obviously forced, and the look on Selene's face was one of embarrassment. Jason couldn't help himself, a smile creeping onto his face. "Thank you for having us," Jason replied in a formal tone. Then, remaining in character, he leaned forward and grasped Selene's hand and gently kissed the back of it. Jason peered up from her hand with a devilish grin. Selene's face had gone crimson, her eyes wide in surprise. "Jason!" Helen exclaimed. "It's fine, Helen," Ursula said with a cackle. "I didn't think anyone could make my Selene blush. She must be a little bit sweet on your son." Now it was Jason's turn to blush. "Now that the young ones are suitably embarrassed, please come in," said Ursula. The inside of the house was crammed with assorted German bric-a-brac. Old clocks adorned the walls, as well as figurines and steins littering the shelves. The furniture was old and quaint, with needlepoint pillows nestled on the sofas. Jason and Helen walked slowly around, marveling at everything Ursula had to show them, and genuinely interested in the stories each piece held. "I love your house, Ursula," Helen said. "Why, thank you, dear." "It's exactly what you would think a turn-of-the-century German cottage would look like," Jason added. Ursula looked about the room with both pride and love. "Everything you see has been in my family for generations. This will all be Selene's when I'm gone," she said fondly, indicating her granddaughter, who looked extremely uncomfortable. "That won't be for some time yet," Selene replied. Jason noted the change in her demeanor and decided to change the subject. "I have to admit, I'm really looking forward to eating some authentic German cuisine," Jason said. "Then I hope you brought your appetite, young man," Ursula said with a grin as they retired to the dining room. After Helen and Jason felt positively stuffed, they were sitting opposite each other, both wearing the same expression of fatigue and bloating. Selene and Ursula were out of sight, but familiar sounds could be heard emanating from the kitchen. Light beads of sweat had broken out on Helen's brow as she fidgeted in her chair. Jason leaned forward, careful not to be heard by their hosts. "That was without a doubt the best and largest meal I've ever eaten in my life," he whispered. Helen feigned mock hurt. "The best meal you've ever had?" Jason was about to reply, but Helen waved him off. "I'm joking. Ursula is an amazing cook," she said. "What was that roll with the bacon and onion?" "Rouladen. What about the sauerbraten?" Helen said, but Jason shook his head. "It was the pot roast with vinegar and seasoning," Helen added. "I remember now. Who would have thought vinegar in pot roast?" Jason smiled, then muffled a burp through a closed hand. "I'll have to get the recipe for that one," Helen said. Just then Selene and Ursula entered the dining room, each carrying a plate of dessert. Selene was holding a chocolate-layered cake, and Ursula was holding a pastry dusted with icing sugar. "Whoa, they look good," Jason said. Ursula looked pleased. "This is a Viennese apple strudel, and Selene has a Donauwellen, a chocolate and vanilla-layered cake with sour cherries and cream." "The Donauwellen is to die for," Selene interjected. "I think I will," Helen said with a groan. "Good," You can sample both, Ursula replied with a chuckle. Selene unstacked 4 small plates as Ursula cut 4 generous servings of each dessert, serving first Helen and Jason, then Selene and herself. It's official. I'm not eating anything for at least a month, Helen said, taking a sip of her coffee. Yeah, Mrs. Jaeger, you can have us over any time, Jason added. You are too kind. These are simple dishes my mother taught me, and I have taught Selene. She helped cook tonight as well, Ursula said. Jason and his mother looked impressed. I'm afraid that's a dying practice in this day and age, Helen replied. I don't know whether it's the young not caring to learn, or my generation not having the patience to teach, but I think it's important to pass on our lessons, or they will become lost forever, Ursula said plainly. I totally agree, Helen said. I knew your uncle, Helen, Ursula said, changing the subject suddenly. You knew Uncle Plato? Helen replied. He was a warm, intelligent man, your uncle. We both shared a passion for reading and history, in particular this town's, Ursula said. Helen smiled fondly. I remember as a little girl Uncle Plato telling me fairy tales. They were always so vivid and detailed. Some were scary, but I didn't care. He always made me feel safe, Helen said. Jason regarded his mother as she divulged this story from her youth. When was the last time you saw him? Ursula asked. Helen looked embarrassed at the question. It's been years, more than I can count, I'm afraid. That's all right. Life gets in the way of things. Plato knew this all too well. What was important was the time you had together. He never forgot you. He liked to talk about you after he had received one of your letters, Ursula said. Helen's eyes had darkened at this turn of discussion. When Selene told me of Jason's book, I remembered sitting in his library, having one of many discussions with him. It brought back a lot of good memories. Did you bring it with you, Jason? Ursula asked. Jason nodded and retrieved the book from his bag. Here you are, Mrs. Jaeger, he said, handing her the book. She studied it, then looked at Jason. My eyes are tired tonight. Would you mind if I keep it for a little bit? Selene could return it to you later, she offered. Of course, ma'am. Take as much time as you need, Jason replied. Grandmother, have a look at this pendant Jason found in the book, Selene said quickly. Pendant? Oh yeah, this fell out when I first found it. I thought it may have been a bookmark, but I decided to wear it, Jason said as he pulled it from the collar of his shirt. Ursula moved quickly from her chair, reaching across the table, her eyes fixed on the silver cross. It's beautiful, and looks old like me, she laughed. Would you mind if I kept it too? I might have some books with information about it, she continued. Before Jason could respond, Selene jumped in. No need, I'll take a picture of it instead, Selene said. Ursula nodded with a smile, except her eyes remained narrowed on the pendant around Jason's neck. Later that night, Jason and Helen stood outside the Jaeger front door. They thanked Ursula and Selene for dinner, and a wonderful night, before waving farewell. Ursula stood, watching long after the van had departed, casting the occasional glance towards the stars. She shivered and threw the scarf she wore around her neck before turning off the lights and closing the front door. Chapter 13. Helen was dressed in gray slacks and a white blouse, heading off for work. She was juggling a mug of coffee, keys, paperwork, and a piece of toast clenched between her teeth as she opened the front door. Selene was on the other side, her fist raised ready to knock. Whoa, you startled me, Helen said. Sorry, Mrs. Page, Selene replied. Please, call me Helen, she said with a smile. Is Jason about? Selene asked, looking over Helen's shoulder. I don't think so. Being Saturday morning and the fact that he's nursing one hell of a food hangover. He'll still be in bed, Helen said, laughing. You'll have to thank your grandmother again for me, and next time it's our turn. That would be great, Selene replied. Listen, I hate to be rude, but I'm running late for the clinic, Helen said, then yelled out Jason's name. Jason's voice echoed groggily back in response. He should be down in a minute. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen, Helen said as she walked out the door. Jason sat up in bed, his sheet, one of which had been ripped, tangled around him. He'd had another weird dream where he had been running through the forest, climbing trees and scaling mountains. The dream had appeared so vivid and real. Even his muscles were aching. He rubbed his face and ran his fingers through his hair. He was just about to get up when Selene walked into the room carrying 2 mugs of steaming coffee. Jason was too shocked to speak as he pulled the sheets across his waist. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," Selene said as she handed one of the cups to Jason. He took it sheepishly from her. "Thanks," he said, taking a big sip. Selene sat down on the end of the bed. "I was thinking if you wanted, we could go to the town library and do some research ourselves on the pendant," Selene suggested, taking a sip of her coffee. "Sounds like a good idea," Jason replied a little stiffly, attempted to act casual. "When you get ready, we'll go," Selene said. "Right," Jason replied, as he hesitantly got up from his bed. It was painfully obvious to Selene that he was embarrassed. Dressed only in boxers, he walked over to the other side of the room to retrieve some clothes. Selene was enjoying the view of Jason's muscular physique. Her eyes lingered on his upper torso, watching his body flex while he dressed. Jason had his back to her, and when he finished, Selene turned her head away, pretending not to have noticed his dressing and discomfort. Now that he was clothed, Jason was almost acting normal. "Have you had breakfast yet? If not, I can whip us up some eggs," Jason offered. "That would be nice," Selene replied as they headed downstairs. After breakfast, they walked leisurely through Perigord Park, sharing a comfortable silence, enjoying the beautiful clear day and each other's company. They had just reached the steps to the library when they heard a loud voice call out, "I thought the library had a no skank policy." Jason and Selene's heads whipped around to see a small group of teens crowded by a park bench. It was Hector, Tiberius, and some of their friends. They were all chuckling. "What did you say?" Jason growled, taking a step toward the boys. Selene placed a hand on his arm. Jason stopped in his tracks. "I'll ask again. What did you say?" "You're priceless. You get lucky. That one time, and now you think you're the Wolverine," Hector said, his entourage continuing to laugh. Jason took a deep breath. "I must have given you concussion, because you're making absolutely no sense," Jason said calmly. "But if you want a rematch, I'll be glad to oblige you," he said, placing his backpack on the ground and gently nudging Selene to the side. Jason advanced on the group with his fists clenched. Jason closed in on Hector when a voice stopping him in his tracks. "What's going on here?" It was Hector's father, the sheriff. He strode over to the group of teenagers. He was tall and lean with a square jaw, a boxer's pug nose, and an ugly slash for a mouth. He was dressed in a tan police uniform, black spit-polished shoes, and mirrored aviator sunglasses. His face was one that didn't smile much, Jason guessed. Hector and Tiberius smirked at the sheriff's approach. "I said, what the hell's going on here?" Before Jason could answer, Hector spoke up. "This is the kid from school, Dad. He was just—" Sheriff Rope silenced him with a wave of his hand as he regarded Jason. "So you're the punk that gave my son a touch-up," Sheriff Rope said. "It wasn't like that," Selene said, but Sheriff Rope cut her off with a glare. "That was a rhetorical question, Miss Jaeger," Sheriff Rope said, placing heavy emphasis on her name. Sheriff Rope stared intently at Jason. "I'm very interested in Mr. Page at the moment. I've seen your file. Aggravated assault on numerous occasions, and you've barely been in Perigord a week and you're fighting again," Sheriff Rope said, his constant gaze behind the sunglasses unnerving. Jason met it, though, his jaw clenched. He realized no matter what he said, it would be pointless to this man. "If I had my way, you would have been up on charges from the other day. Do you understand?" Sheriff Rope said. Menacingly, he placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, his grip digging into the muscle. "A little early in the day for jackboots, isn't it?" Sheriff Rope and Jason turned to see Mr. Walker walking purposely down the library steps, dressed the same as when Jason had first seen him the other day, tweed suit, bow tie, and glasses. "Mind your business, Ulysses. I'm dealing with this," Sheriff Rope replied. "Dealing with what?" "All I saw was your son and his friends antagonizing the lad here and insulting the young lady," Mr. Walker said as he continued down the steps. He nodded at Selene, who gave him a grateful smile. "I said butt out, Ulysses. This is police business. Go and read a book or something," Sheriff Rope replied, clearly annoyed at Walker's interference. Walker stopped near the sheriff, who released his hand from Jason, giving the librarian his full attention. "Go read a book. Ouch! I'm cut by your sharp wit. Maybe if you read more and acted less, you'd realize that the boy hasn't done anything, and your hand on a minor who is not committing a crime or interfering with your duties is a clear violation of his rights, as well as assault," Walker said. Both men were now standing face to face. Sheriff Rope was a couple of inches shorter than Mr. Walker and a good 50 pounds lighter as well. "But if you like, I can pull the video footage from the library's CCTV system," Mr. Walker said smugly. "You're an asshole, Ulysses," Sheriff Rope whispered, loud enough so that only Walker and Jason could hear. "You better believe it, and it's Mr. Walker to you, you ignorant, self-important little man," Walker said. Sheriff Rope's face went ashen. He clenched his fists. "Hold it right there, before you make the biggest mistake of your career, and I embarrass you in front of your kin," Walker said quietly, a smile on his face. Sheriff Rope checked himself, then glanced at the front of the library, clearly trying to spot the cameras, then shifting his gaze at Jason. "Keep your nose clean and stay away from my boy," he growled. He then glared at Hector and his friends. "All of you get going. I'll see you at home later," he said, pointing to his son. Sheriff Rope turned back to Walker. "This ain't finished," Sheriff Rope growled, turning and walking away. "You mean this isn't finished, don't you?" Walker called back. Sheriff Rope paused mid-stride, then continued on. Hector and his friends were also hastily leaving the area. "I love a change in my daily routine. Would you two care for some tea?" Walker exclaimed happily. Jason and Selene nodded dumbly back. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Perigord has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.